Welcome to Full Prefrontal, the show that exposes the mysteries of executive function. This podcast is a collection of conversations about the role of the prefrontal cortex, which impacts your focus, planning, problem-solving, emotional balance, and independence. So join us as we explore executive function and the science of learning. And now, here's your host, the founder of EXQ, Sucheta Kamath.
Welcome to another episode of Full Prefrontal. My mission is to help people understand that their brain's prefrontal cortex, at its best, acts as an orchestra conductor, directing actions, guiding emotions, tweaking responses, and calibrating decision-making in order to create beautiful, harmonious symphony of a well-lived life. And I bring you the guest who contributes to this process of uncovering the key components that drive and propel this neocortex into self-regulation. Each guest brings their unique perspective and their expertise to help promote the growth and development of this unique cerebral system that is designed to collaborate, communicate, and connect. And today I have a fabulous guest, and I am so thrilled that I get to celebrate her accomplishments with you because today is a very special day of her launch of her second edition of the book she has written. So let me introduce you to a dear friend and a colleague, a fellow SLPeeps, Elizabeth Sautter. She is a speech language pathologist, an award-winning author, blogger, highly sought after speaker. She specializes in social emotional learning, and she's been around in the field, inspiring all of us since 1996. She has special interest in this topic because she brings her personal story. I'm sure she'll share that with us. But she created a Make Social Learning Stick a while ago, and I'm so glad she has taken the time to kind of revisit that and make it even maybe 2020 ready, or maybe beyond 2020. And probably, I'm sure she has a lot to offer in terms of COVID context. And finally, she's also a co-author of a popular children's book series, my favorite, called Whole Body Listening, Larry. So welcome, Elizabeth, to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, it's so great to be here, Sucheta. I'm great. I'm really excited today. And that introduction was just like music to my ears in so many ways. I can't even tell you, but we talk all about helping others communicate and connect. And I love the orchestra. And yeah, let's play this. Let's play this music.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad we play in the same band. So I'm so happy. All right. So I asked this question of all my guests. Since we talk about self-regulation, executive function, communication, do you mind telling us a little bit about your own abilities and skill set? And when did you become self-aware that you have these gifts or you have these challenges?
Wow. Interesting. Okay. So me personally okay. Wow, that's a big question. Okay, so I grew up in Oakland, in California, and my sister is actually developmentally delayed.
Yes.
So she's 2 years older than I am, and my parents actually were clear about what were her challenges until I started developing faster than her. And so that's when she, got testing and whatnot. And she was actually in the portables, when it wasn't mainstreamed or anything back then, and with an eye patch and all these great things. Right. So there was a lot of challenges going on, and it was really interesting for me growing up with OT equipment in my basement, which is actually a lot of fun. And then, sitting in a lot of waiting rooms and whatnot. But along the way, this is actually something I don't talk about very often. Some of my needs in terms of learning were not discovered. Wow. And so I was always kind of in the slower reading group and struggled a little bit. But then I was gifted when I went to middle school, tested for the gifted classroom. So it was really confusing for me. So in general, I think that my brain on the spectrum is, one of those resilient, really driven, but struggles with some of the details and some of the, basically as a speech and language pathologist, I have diagnosed myself, it's never been diagnosed on paper, as having dyslexia. And now I'm learning a lot about this more for my own children, who I have two boys, and my older struggles quite a bit with executive functioning. He was diagnosed in fourth grade with ADHD, learning disabilities, and anxiety. And I saw some of the same things that I recognized in myself as a child in him, not so much the behavioral things, but, he was the child that got his name on the board and benched for recess. I mean, come on, really benching kids for recess. So they all heard it from me. There's a great article that I have on my Pinterest page about that exact thing, about keeping kids away from recess who need to get their energy out. So anyway, that's also been part of my journey, is myself and how my brain works and learning about that. And I have editors for everything, but if you catch anything, you tell me, because I will never be offended, because it's not how my brain works. But my son as well, who has ADHD, learning disabilities, and anxiety, and just trying to get him the services that he needs, because he also is super bright. And everybody said, oh, he's fine, he just needs to be more motivated. Yeah. You know the story. And you can read about my journey. I've written a blog on that as well over on my website. But, that's been, a lot of advocating and ups and downs. And we call it, actually, Julian and I just did a podcast, actually a summit together for ADHD. And it was all about riding the waves. It takes ripples to make waves. And we talked all about riding the waves. So lot of personal things.
I think it's so interesting. So I've been talking to experts all around the world, and this insight, personal insight, when you comes to you much later, once you're a little bit older and mature and have that capacity to look back. Mm-hmm. And I've always found that the clinicians that are on my podcast have so much more deeper insight. And I no offense to anybody else, but they are much more attuned, which is probably gets them help ready. So they're a lot more helpful, because they have kind of had a lot more introspection. I don't think I have any learning disability when I was growing up. I do think, however, so I speak 5 languages and write 3. And I think my education suddenly went through a mega transformation, where I was learning all subjects in Marathi, my mother tongue, until 10th grade. And 11th grade, everything shifted to English, which is science and math. So I'm doing math in my head in my mother tongue, and then you have to write this formula and theorems. Don't know the language, don't know the words, and I kind of got really screwed up, I think, in terms of I'm slower. I was not very confident if I'm writing proficiently, but I was a great writer. I could have been a literature major in my mother tongue. So I do understand the experiences because of having this little, I don't know what to make of it kind of experience.
Well, yes, your brain is like over language processing, over executive functioning, with all the different, signals going which way, where do they fire? I have a question for you though. Yes. What language do you dream in?
So it's so funny. I think it's now I am a proficient English speaker so if you take a trajectory of 40 years, I would say last 20 years it's been in English.
Okay.
And I don't dream as vividly, so that's another problem.
Right.
We'll talk about that. But okay, coming back, so I wanted to kind of set the stage for this, the new edition of your book, which is such a meaningful and important idea that you have put forward for everybody to benefit from, is more not just make social learning stick, but make social emotional learning. So I wanted to kind of start off by some foundational skills that you and I in the field of speech language pathology talk about: pragmatics, this ability to apply knowledge of language in a social context, and recognize that language is only effective or ineffective if it is contextually inappropriate. So you might be using a switch from formal to informal language, code switching, or speaking with your peers versus your parents, talking with your teachers versus talking to somebody on the street. So talk to us, begin with communication. What does communication mean to you? And why is communication so important? And this may sound very obvious to people, but I think we have a specific lens that we can really organize our thoughts about it. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I mean, I have so many thoughts, and you said so much there. And, behavior is communication. We say that quite often. And I've worked over the years with many behavior consultants right out of grad school. I worked at a school for severely impaired children with autism and behaviors. And we worked alongside behavior consultants so closely. And it was such a great synergy of our expertise in looking at behavior as communication, because, and, behavior as communication can be positive, whereas you're, using verbal language and smiling and using your hand gestures and hugging, all the different wonderful things. And it can also be challenging. So if a child doesn't have, or a person doesn't have the words, the language, whatever it might be, then what happens is we have maladaptive behavior. And that could look like, swearing. It could look like punching. It could look like, tantrum on the floor, whatever it might be. And we see this quite often with toddlers because they don't have the language to express themselves yet. And amongst other things that they're managing with emotional regulation. So the thought is then to increase communication to decrease maladaptive behavior. Because if these children, actually they weren't only children, they were, ages 5 through 22 at this school. And these were the children who actually used to be institutionalized, and now they have wonderful schools that can support them with these behavioral challenges. But we would do all kinds of things, from increasing verbal and expressive language, receptive meaning understanding. Expressive obviously is using signs, gestures, picture communications, or verbal language to get their needs and wants met, to increase their communication so that they would then decrease these maladaptive behaviors. And then the goal was to get them back into the public school system when they were able to increase their communication and have their behavior be somewhat manageable for a public school setting. So that right there is the extreme of it. But, in this day and age, I think communication is everything. And what you said about connection and collaboration, it's just like you have to have the skills to communicate, to have the ability to interact with other people and in an effective way and collaborate and connect. And such a big part of communication is social. And that's what you mentioned too, is understanding, the thoughts of others. That's the perspective taking, really being able to step in somebody's shoes and realize they have different experiences and beliefs and whatever than you. The pragmatic language that you mentioned in terms of the context, actually, my book is all context-based. And for that very reason, because parents and, we're in these situations with our kids. How do you teach in these natural situations? And all the situations are teachable. We have receptive and expressive language, that's understanding and then being able to express. And then the joint attention too, which is being able to have shared focus on an object or a situation, which is huge, especially those with autism, but executive function challenges too, because your attention is diverted all over the place in milliseconds. And so, you could miss that nonverbal expression on somebody's face, or you could miss the nuance of an actual situation, or some shared imagination and play with little kids. So there's a lot to unpack when it comes to communication, and it's a lot more vast and complex than people really realize.
I love that. I think you have such deep understanding of the topic, and that the nuances, the crevices of interpersonal relationship that hinges on these tiny like milestones of behaviors. And I really like the way you said that behavior is communication. And I'll add to it, which is lack of is also communication. So if somebody doesn't say something, that's also communication. Silence is communication. And I think that kind of the burden, and when I work with the people, I always say it's when we collaborate, it has to be 50-50 lifting of the burden. So if other person has to do more work of figuring out what you're trying to say, what you're trying to be, then you're not doing your job, which is kind of share who you are, what you mean, what you want to accomplish. So talk a little bit about this social skills, which you alluded to this. So the social communication, which is understanding people and understanding minds of others, which then feeds into being able to make friends, keep friends, follow the etiquette or protocol of given circumstances. And most importantly, where executive function meets here is how to adapt. If you don't know something, and I always tell people, this experiment that has turned out to be a really good experiment for me, coming from another country to another country is a great way to kind of put your own understanding of the culture and etiquette and rules and regulations and the implicit to test. I'll give you a quick example. When I was in grad school, I came here first, and in India, this is kind of probably I shouldn't even give example on the air, but kind of plucking kids' cheeks when you meet them as a form of greeting was very, very socially acceptable. And so in my clinic, I walk in with a fellow clinician as a grad school, and my professor had offered us generously his 2-year-old to do language sample with. And so we got into this booth, and we were being video recorded. 2 of us, the other fellow clinician was American, and here I am, FOB, fresh off the boat from India, go straight for this girl's cheeks and like, hi. And oh my God. So she just kind of started screaming so loudly and did not want to be ever having anything to do with me. So I was kind of taken out of that situation. I didn't understand what I did wrong. I was so embarrassed, as well as I was petrified to deal with kids from that then on. But so tell us a little bit about, so I obviously lost this little translation that don't touch children.
Yes.
Or don't greet them, establish a rapport in a different way.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what your understanding of this process is.
It's so fascinating, and it's so nuanced and kind of like, a little bit dangerous, like, I mean, so, there's so much I could say here. Let me just start from the fact that, so in my book, as I mentioned, it's context based. So it's divided into 4 sections. I added a new section for the second book. It's home, community, holidays, special events. And then now I added bridging home and school, because I've done so much of that now with my son, with his own IEP. And it's just so important, right? Everybody said
these are 4 contexts. So can you walk us through all the 4 contexts?
Yes. So basically, so in the book, there's an introduction, and there's a huge grid on, where your child might be struggling in different areas, including executive function and all the things with social communication and emotional regulation. So you can find out, if you're looking to focus on executive functioning, then you would go to that column and you would find all the activities in the book that support with executive function skills. But the rest of the book is over 200 activities, and it's divided into home, community, holidays, special events, and bridging home and school. And so like in the home section, the first pages are start the day, and then it goes into rules for having fun and encouraging play with siblings and pretend play, anti-boredom, chores, media, phone, pets, all the different things that you would do at home with your child. And then in the community, it's in the car, at the mall, at the movies, at the doctor's office, eating out, all these different things. And then, in holidays and special events, Mother's Day, Halloween, Thanksgiving, all of that. And then the school piece is like the things that parents would need to focus on in terms of home and school. And transitioning their child for success and partnering with the school staff. At the bottom of every single one of these pages, like since I'm at the bridging home and school one right now, the bottom is the hidden rules. And it says each school teacher assigns homework in different ways. So these are just, going over the things that you would need to maybe go over in terms of the hidden rules, what's expected, what are the social expectation, we call them social rules as well, for each context. And there's about 3 or 4 for each one. So another one would be at home. This is one for TV time and show time. So watching TV with other people, you won't always get to watch your favorite show. This is time for being together and using your flexible thinking. So just and then there's a whole bunch more that I could talk about. But so basically I've given examples of things that parents can prime, which we call in the field, priming your child for success, in helping them to know what's expected and what those hidden social rules are, those pragmatic language. We talked about that code switching for each of these contexts. And, of course, in different cultures, it's different, and every household is different, really. Like some people take off their shoes when you walk into their house, right? Some people pray before they eat their meals. Some people, it's fine to eat in front of the TV. Like it's just different in every household, and it's not meant to be hard and set rules. It's just to have parents realize that they need to be going over these things with their children to set them up for success. And I have so many stories that are similar to yours in terms of the squeezing the cheeks. There's with my clients, I have one client actually that he's an adult. He has a job, and he's been trying to connect with his coworkers. And he doesn't like to go out with them after work, but I've told him that that's how he can show that he really wants to, get to know them and like put more in his person file about them, to get them to talk, outside of work. And so each month he goes one time. And so we always go over it beforehand and talk about, where are you going to go? Olive Garden, this place, that place. And we research all the different hidden rules of that place and like what it would be like. Well, one time he decided to go without reviewing it with me. So we went to this like dive bar, and they were going to play pool. And I said, okay, how'd it go? And he's like, I could only stay for 5 minutes. I was so overwhelmed, because he went in there, and I usually in my presentations, I show the picture because I Googled it with him afterwards. And it was this total dive bar that had bras hanging from the ceiling and underwear and lingerie and all of these like, I don't know what.
Unexpected.
Unexpected. Like, how could I, and so he didn't get to go over the hidden rules of this particular dive bar. And he was so overwhelmed. He's just like, get me out of here. And so there's just so many nuances, even when you do go over them, but it can be helpful to review them ahead of time for sure. And afterwards to go over what we do, an autopsy, right?
So what you're saying is really kind of we have to incorporate in our work is this value of context, because context determines the relationship between the participants and what's allowable and what's not allowable. And those related rules or those protocols are invisible to somebody who struggles with social understanding. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Peter Vermeulen talks about it being context blindness. So there can be people who have a hard time reading facial expressions. There can be people who have a hard time taking perspective and understanding the thoughts of others, theory of mind. And then there's people that really struggle to figure out situational awareness and what is going on in actual situations. And those are the lagging skills that need to be worked on. Michelle Garcia Winner calls it, when we talk about the hidden social rules, as like having people understand what's expected and what's unexpected. And so, we try to have, be, accepting and not judgmental with, appropriate and inappropriate, or, etiquette and manners and those kind of things. But there are certain things, like zipping up your pants before you walk out of the bathroom, or certain things you say and don't say, or taking off your shoes or not, or pinching people's cheeks you make people feel comfortable or uncomfortable, right?
And the reverse is also very interesting. So, and when I present, I talk to people all the time that when I came to this country, I felt like an alien, or I felt almost like I have acquired autism, not developmental autism, but kind of not really knowing the rules or the things. And it's so interesting that most of the burden falls on somebody who is coming from a minority, or who is in the larger context. So I have to adapt to the larger context. So if you came to India, then you will be adapting to larger context of India. And so people not knowing is something I also have to accommodate for. And me not knowing is also something I have to accommodate for.
It's so much. It's so complex.
It's so complicated.
Right. And we, I think that we could do a better job at, understanding different cultures and biases. I mean, this is a whole nother topic that I don't want to get into, right? But yes.
I'll tell you
I agree.
Quick story about my son. So in my house, we don't wear footwear in the house. Even when we have workers or people come, we have booties now. We brought a whole pack, so we give them if they're not used to it. And when my son was in kindergarten, so my in-laws and my parents kind of were always at home. And he grew up eating with his fingers. So when he entered pre-K, not even kindergarten, he was eating his snacks and his meal with his fingers. And somebody, a very precocious child, called him a savage. Of course, I loved his vocabulary, but I was kind of said, well, he doesn't know your culture, your context.
Right.
So what I did is I called the principal or the head of the school, and I said, I'm going to bring snacks. And I brought 2 snacks. One was solid and one was liquid. And so you couldn't eat. Like imagine having liquidy, like not so liquid, but like a soup that's you couldn't eat with your fingers. So I served both these items on a plate, and my son was extremely proficient in eating both without ever like spilling or touching anything. And then I kind of walked the entire little munchkins through the rules of eating. So in our culture, you don't use your left hand. You always eat with your right hand. You do not let food, you either use these 3 fingers, your thumb and first 2 fingers. You do not let any food touch the palm. Now, if you follow these rules, now it becomes an executive process, right? So eating, if you're not used to eating, you're like slobbering, it's like trickling down your elbows. And once I opened these little kids' minds about another way of eating, they never, of course, called him any names. But also he was so proud of himself of being very proficient in his ability to do a particular way that nobody else knew.
Oh my gosh. I'm just like picturing this, like, even in my household, and my younger son, he has dysgraphia. I wonder how that, which is, handwriting challenges for those who have heard that term. But yes, it's just, that would be really sloppy.
Exactly. But I just think that you're right. I think this kind of awareness that some people don't have the context, hence they're under functioning, is such an important way of developing compassion and patience for it. So tell us a little bit about this idea of another little important component that you talk about in your book is that listening skills. In what ways people lose their audience or do not pay attention, and what are some of the strong, powerful, meaningful listening skills that I think have incredible meaningful application to even adults with or without any challenges, not just kids?
Yeah. So this has become huge in our culture of in the United States. I think that we're all just overstimulated with technology and media, and we're getting information so fast, and it's coming at us from all different directions. And we talk about being mindful, like having everything in your mind just coming fast, versus being mindful, and which John Kabat-Zinn talks about mindfulness as paying attention on purpose without judgment. And so that's one of the new additions that I put into the book, because I've been trained with mindfulness through Mindful Schools, which is the organization in Oakland. And it's just changed my life. And it really has a lot of benefits for those with executive function challenges and ADHD and just people in general. And so it's something that I practice on a daily basis, is just focusing on my breath and getting grounded and having intention, and also just noticing when I'm not in a mindful state and when I might be feeling a little worried or anxious or overwhelmed, and just working on getting myself grounded again. So these are things that I've taught my boys, and what I teach all of my clients as well, including the parents, to model this skill and strategy, and then to also teach it to their children. And so this is something I've infused in the book as well. And mindfulness doesn't have to be, sitting in silence or a lotus position for 20 minutes. It can be, going for a mindful walk and just focusing on one step at a time, or listening to music and one sound, or, mindful eating. It could be all of that, but it definitely pertains to listening. So this is where we can put our phones down, and we can, look people, in the face or the eyes, if you're comfortable with that and it's part of your culture. If not, there's other ways to tell people that you are listening, and, those who have to move around or whatever it might be, it's sometimes can be helpful for them to listen better when they're moving around. And that's just all self-exploration to know what works best for you. But honestly, practicing mindfulness can be a really great way to learn how to pause and be in the moment.
What I love about your approach and what you're discussing here is that awareness that first you're not doing it. So somewhere you have to lean into accepting that you are part of this 21st century culture where information is coming at us as like a fast train. Second is we are hyper exposed to gadgets that bring information, unsolicited information. And third, we are dealing with people who are also exposed to the same information that we are victims of. So we can't really accuse other people of not paying attention. Put your phone down when you have your phone in your hand. And I love that so many of our fields are now incorporating mindfulness in the works. I think you and I talked about this before. I myself have had a practice of 10 to 12 years of mindfulness meditation, but I'm also going through formal training of mindfulness meditation teacher training. And I'm doing that so that I can work with a homeless population that I've been teaching for the last 2.5 years. So these practices, so that they can have some another tool in their tool belt for self-empowerment. Tell me, this idea that you also talk about is another huge value added through your approach is this navigating transitions. So talk about what do transitions mean to children, and in what places and spaces do transitions show up, and why transitions are so hard for children as well as adults, but we don't admit it.
Right. Well, there's transitions happening all throughout our day, every day. We think of the big ones as, waking up in the morning and being able to get yourself out of bed and fed and dressed and, focused on whatever you need to be focused on, which right now is, at my home, it's distance learning. And that in itself is just a dredge. It's just huge, right? And then, from in distance learning, you think about the minute things about it, like, so say you've gotten yourself out of, just think about all the transitions we have throughout our day. It's really insane. Right. And then in distance learning, you have, working in a larger, Zoom room to maybe groups to then, some of the kids are working outside of the Zoom classes on distance learning. We have synchronous learning. We have asynchronous learning. There's just so much to keep track of. And then, there's transitions from the day to the evening, to homework, to bed, to sports, to friends, to dinner, to, the table. It's just constantly transitioning. And there's so much involved with that, not only with the brain in terms of the cognitive load of, being able to have that, this is all executive functioning, right? So it's basically the hindsight, okay, what was that like, that working memory? What's in my memory about what do I know I need to do every morning I get up? That's pretty rote now. You don't have to maybe think about it as much, but okay, today is a different, like, in our distance learning, we have every 2 weeks, they change classes and they have 2 weeks at 2 classes at a time. So, okay, what classes do I have this Monday and, or this Tuesday, to be getting ready for? What books do I need? What materials do I want? That's all the hindsight that you're, retrieving in your working memory, to then also forethought to be, showing up with my hair looking decent. And this is the teacher who wants me to have my video on, and this is the class that I have that girl that I have a crush on, so I better have that cute shirt on or whatever. And so that's the forethought of your goals for that, the outcome of having a positive experience, to be able to figure out what to do right now in the moment. So that's the executive function piece in all these transitions, which we just think is like, come on, get out of bed, what's the big deal, feed yourself and get on Zoom, come on. As parents, it's just like, it seems so easy, but there's so much going on. But then there's also the social regulation, sensory regulation, and emotional regulation. So just thinking about, your body as you're from state to state, as especially with my kids' bodies right now with teenagers, their hormones are all over the place, and, their sleep patterns are so different. And, the regulation piece of it is huge. And then if you have a child that has any kind of sensory overwhelm, that's another piece of transitions too, from one situation to another, and, the temperature, the noises, the sounds. It's all just huge. And it's just important for us to be aware of your child's own unique profile in where they might thrive. And these are no big deals, and where they might struggle. And these are such, like you said, invisible, nuance-based, lagging skills. So that's why we have to really look at the child as a whole and figure out where they do need support and how we can scaffold and how we can help them with making these routines and activities more smooth for them.
I really think our listeners are going to be very surprised, because I think to people, transition is only task. You move from a task to another, but you're talking about emotional transition, bodily transitions, and transitions of routine to non-routine and back to a routine task. And I can imagine why, in so many ways, this is hard for developing minds, primarily because it requires you to turn something on and turn something off. So the autopilot needs to be turned off, your intentionality needs to be turned on, or your code switching. So formality needs to be turned on, informality needs to be turned off. So much responsibility to what filter you're using to look at information. So the last part of this discussion, I wanted to kind of talk about your wheelhouse, which is managing big feelings. So you're big on meltdowns, mood swings, sense of overwhelm, and you have some amazing techniques for that. So talk a little bit about what is the makeup of that? What goes into children having these big emotions, and how can we channel them?
Yeah, so this actually can tie back almost everything that we've talked about today. And this is one of the reasons why I added the word emotional learning into the book, because social emotional learning and, as you know, executive functioning are all intertwined. If I could have executive functioning in the title, I would. It just would have been such a mouthful as it is already. And I actually have two card decks too, one on emotional learning and one on social learning, that are sort of everyday activities, not so much context-based. But so the emotions are a huge piece of it, and the self-regulation. As we mentioned before, behavior is communication. And if you're having these challenging behaviors in these situations, it's really important for us to look underneath the water line. It's, how we talk a lot in the field about it being an iceberg. Our kids are kind of similar to an iceberg model, where you see the child, the behaviors on the tip of the iceberg, which is really only 10% of what's going on. You have to get curious and lean in and lower the water line and go deeper to figure out what their lagging skills are. And if you have a child that is having meltdowns or overwhelm or anxiety or shutdown, where's my turtle? In our parenting course here, I'll grab him really quickly. You can see, this is the turtle that we have in our parenting course, and the co-creator of the parenting course, Rebecca, has the porcupine, because oftentimes we can retreat into our shell and when we're overwhelmed. And this is my younger son. My older son is more of the his cohort is the porcupine, where your quills come out. Yeah. And then we talk a lot about how the parents are the wise owl. Anyway, so figuring out what's going on underneath the water line when a child is having those turtling moments, or a porcupine, or maybe they're having a combination of both, and helping them with what's going on. So we need to determine what those lagging skills are. Are they having trouble communicating with their words, or understanding with their language processing? Are they having trouble with transitions? Are they having trouble with task initiation? I want to reiterate what you were saying about task initiation too, because my son, the one with ADHD, he struggles so much with non-desired tasks, and it looks so, he can really focus a lot when he's doing video games, but then you ask him to, take out the garbage, and it's like he says it feels like it's stabbing him, the undesired tasks and stuff. Anyway, so thinking about the emotional regulation is just figuring out what are the triggers, what are the lagging skills. Some of our children really have that sensory overwhelm or underwhelm. They might have trouble with interoception. That's how one of the sensory processing senses is understanding how your body feels, and your inner organs are telling your body how it's feeling. It's a domain of an occupational therapist, but I have a lot of clients that struggle with that. And when you struggle with that, then you can't necessarily identify how you're feeling internally and label your feelings, and then get a tool or figure out what to do with it. So a lot of it is just being aware and understanding your own emotions. And then, whether it's mindfulness practice or whether you're doing other kinds of curriculum, like, the zones of regulation or emotional ABCs to hone in on this more, there's a lot of work that can be done. And then there's also the piece of understanding emotions in others, which is, what we call emotional intelligence, and then building emotional literacy. There's so much that could be done here, but it's a huge part of social emotional learning and executive functioning, because you have to regulate in order to execute any tasks.
I think the big picture with broad strokes you're painting here is, I think, this internal empowerment, that when we talk about executive function and when we talk about self-regulation, we want to discover the power within to know that I can change my ways. I can change my relationship to my world. I can build skills so that I can become in charge of my destiny or destination, or both. And I think I really thank you for the work that you are doing, and the hope that you bring to our clients, their families. And I really hope you come back again, because there's so much discussion that we need to have about parenting. So I hope you'll consider and come back again. Before I let you go, what are two of your favorite books that you recommend everybody, or that have influenced you and have made a big impact on you?
That's a hard question, but a very good one. But I would say, I have been extremely influenced by a lot of different experts in the field. And so it's really hard to narrow them down. And I actually have so many of them that have contributed to my book. So I will leave those ones aside, because you can go in my book and you can see all the ones that I recommend there. But the one that really has changed a lot, especially with my own child, is Ross Green's.
I love Ross.
Yeah, his collaborative and proactive solutions that's his curriculum, but also Explosive Child and Treating the Explosive Child. But the one that really honed in for me was Lost at School, and I buy it for all of the teachers that my son is with every year. So I would say that, because it's just a game changer in terms of viewing, as we've talked about today, the behavior on the outside, and thinking of kids doing well if they can, and really honing in on the lagging skills and where you can provide support. So I would say
he's going to be on my podcast in a couple of months. So I will be sure to mention that to him. He'll be so thrilled.
Oh yeah, no, he knows how much I adore him. And I've interviewed him too. He's amazing. So I would say the Ross Green, but I would also, and this is more of a curriculum than a book, but it's really changed my life in so many ways, is the zones of regulation. And it's not just because I teach it and I practice it, and because I train on it, and I'm part of some of the work that Leah Kuipers is doing. But when I first met Leah, and when, she did work at my center and we were very close, but it really changed the way that I view self-regulation and for my own world, and how I was noticing that I was living in what she calls the yellow zone, or what we call the yellow zone, a lot of my life. And that's when I really got into mindfulness and realizing that I don't want to live in that state, and I need to find out what those triggers are and the tools that I can use to get more into a calm state and live my life in more of a joyous fashion. And so I will say, I will give her kudos for that, because it's been an amazing life pivoting experience for me.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. You are a darling. You're a doll. Thank you for your brilliant insights and your time. That's all the time we have. It's been a great pleasure to have these conversations. Thank you for tuning in to this amazing discussion. Keep coming back. If you love what you're hearing, recommend this podcast to your friends, colleagues, your peers. And yes, please continue your journey into self-discovery. There's only one path to betterment, which is self-awareness and strategic thinking. So I thank you all for being here. And that's all the time we have today. So have a great day. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm honored.
Thank you for listening to Full Prefrontal, exposing the mysteries of executive function. To contact your host, Sucheta Kamath, and learn more about her work on improving executive function, visit her website at exqinfiniteknowhow.com. That's www.exqinfiniteknowhow.com. Tune in next week for another informative episode of Full Prefrontal, hosted by the founder of EXQ, Sucheta Kamath.